The early morning sun rose gently over the small town, painting the sky in shades of soft orange and gold. Birds sang in the trees, but inside the small house at the edge of the road, the air was heavy with silence. Maria sat by the window, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea that had gone cold hours ago. Her eyes were tired, red from tears that had long dried on her cheeks. In her lap lay a folded photograph, her late husband Daniel smiling beside her and their two children, Liam and Sophie. It had been 3 months since the accident that took him away. 3 months of trying to stay strong. 3 months of pretending she still had control when in truth everything was slipping away. Daniel had been her anchor, her laughter, her steady hand through every storm. He worked as a mechanic, never earning much but always giving more than he had. Together they had built a life filled with small joys, family dinners, bedtime stories, Sunday walks. But now all that remained was an empty chair at the table and bills that piled higher with every passing week. The landlord had already given her notice. The money left in Daniel's account was almost gone. The cupboards held little more than dry bread and a few potatoes. Liam, only 8 years old, noticed the change in his mother's smile. He would often sneak into her room at night, pretending he needed water just so he could sit near her and hold her hand. Sophie, 5, still asked when Papa would come home. Maria always answered softly, "Papa's watching over us, my love." But every time she said it, her heart ached. She tried to believe her own words, tried to imagine Daniel's spirit watching them, guiding her through the darkness. Still, the nights felt longer, colder, and the silence heavier. Maria thought maybe family could help. Daniel's relatives lived across town, a proud, wealthy family who had always looked down on her for coming from the wrong side of the neighborhood. Yet she swallowed her pride. She packed a small bag with her children's clothes, took the photograph, and walked miles under the hot sun to their house. She rehearsed her words along the way, telling herself she only needed help until she found work. She didn't want pity, only a chance. When she reached their large house with shining windows and a garden full of roses, her heart raced. She knocked. Daniel's older brother, Martin, opened the door. He looked the same, neat suit, cold eyes, a faint smile that didn't reach his face. For a brief moment, Maria saw a flicker of surprise in his expression, maybe even sympathy, but it faded quickly. "Maria," he said flatly, "what brings you here?" She hesitated, feeling the weight of her children's hands in hers. "I came to ask if we could stay for a little while, just until I find a job. I don't want to trouble you, Martin sighed and looked over his shoulder as if checking who might be watching. "You know times are hard," he said. "We can't take on more mouths to feed. You should go to the church. Maybe they can help." "Please," Maria whispered, "just for a few nights." The children, but he stepped back and shook his head. "I'm sorry, Maria, there's nothing we can do." The door closed softly, but to Maria it felt like a mountain crashing down. She stood there for a long moment, staring at the closed door. Liam tugged at her coat. "It's okay, Mama," he said bravely, though his voice trembled. "We'll be okay." Maria forced a smile, brushed her tears, and nodded. "Yes, my love. We'll be okay." She didn't go to the church that day. Pride kept her from asking strangers for help. Instead, she walked toward the edge of town where the air smelled of dust and the houses grew fewer. There, hidden behind old trees, stood an abandoned building, broken windows, faded paint, but still a roof over the walls. She looked at her children, then at the sky. "Just for tonight," she whispered. Inside, the air was cold, but at least it was dry. They gathered old pieces of cardboard and laid them on the floor to make a small bed. Maria wrapped her children in her shawl and hummed a lullaby Daniel used to sing. The melody was soft and warm, and soon Sophie's breathing slowed, her small head resting against Maria's chest. Liam stayed awake a little longer, watching his mother's face. "I miss Papa," he said quietly. "He always made pancakes on Sundays." Maria smiled sadly. "We'll make them again one day," she promised, though she had no flour, no pan, no stove. Still, she said it with a smile because hope was all they had left. The days that followed were long. Maria searched for work everywhere, at shops, houses, small factories. But without references or education, no one wanted to hire her. Some offered kind words, others avoided her eyes. She began selling small things she owned: Daniel's watch, an old ring, a blanket, just to buy bread. Every coin mattered. Every meal felt like a small victory. Yet despite everything, she never let her children see her despair. Every morning she brushed Sophie's hair and told her she was beautiful. She helped Liam practice reading from an old torn book. She smiled even when her stomach ached with hunger. She wanted them to believe that life, though cruel at times, could still be kind. One evening, rain poured down suddenly, soaking the streets. The little building they stayed in began to leak, and cold drops fell through the roof. Maria gathered her children close, covering them with her arms. "It's just rain," she said gently. "It'll stop soon." She whispered stories of sunshine, of gardens and laughter to keep them from being afraid. Hours later, when the rain eased, Maria stepped outside to find help. The streets glistened with puddles, reflecting faint lights from faraway houses. She walked to a bakery and stood near the back door, hoping for leftover bread. When the baker noticed her, he didn't say a word, just handed her a small paper bag with 2 rolls. She thanked him again and again, her eyes full of gratitude. It wasn't much, but it felt like kindness, and kindness, she realized, was as precious as food. That night, they ate the bread slowly, savoring each bite. Sophie giggled when a crumb fell on her nose, and for the first time in weeks, Maria laughed too. It was a soft, broken laugh, but it was real. Days passed into weeks. The cold grew sharper. Maria wrapped her children in old blankets and prayed for warmer nights. Each morning she rose before dawn, determined to try again. There were moments when her hope wavered, when her feet ached, her heart sank, and the memory of Daniel's voice felt like a faraway dream. But every time she saw Liam's steady eyes or Sophie's sleepy smile, she found the strength to go on. Sometimes she would walk past the park where families played and couples laughed. She would sit on a bench holding her children's hands, pretending for a moment that they belonged there too, that their lives hadn't changed. She told stories about their father, how he once built a swing from an old rope, how he made them laugh by pretending to lose at board games. The children would listen, eyes wide, smiles bright, as if the stories could bring him back. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low and the sky turned pink, Maria realized something. Though she had lost almost everything, her husband, her home, her security, she still had the 2 most precious treasures of all, her children and her faith in tomorrow. And even if tomorrow brought only one small good thing, a warm meal, a kind word, a safe night, she would take it as a blessing. That night, as she tucked Liam and Sophie into their corner of the old building, she whispered, "We will find a way." Her voice was steady now, not desperate. It was the sound of quiet courage. Outside, the wind blew gently through the trees, carrying with it the faint promise of change, though she couldn't yet know that fate was already weaving new paths for them. And somewhere, not too far away, a man named Mr. Hart sat alone by a small fire, looking out into the same night sky. His heart, too, was heavy with memories. But soon the paths of these lonely souls would cross, and life, in its mysterious kindness, would start to heal them both. Morning light entered softly through the broken window of the old building, where Maria and her children slept. The cold had made the night long and restless, but the sight of her children breathing peacefully gave Maria a small reason to smile. She brushed Sophie's hair from her face and whispered, "Wake up, my little sunshine." Sophie opened her sleepy eyes and yawned. "Mama, can we have warm milk today?" Maria's heart squeezed a little. "Maybe soon, love," she said gently. "We'll see what we can find." She didn't want to let them know how hard each day had become. The few coins she had left were almost gone. She tied her scarf, held their small hands, and stepped out into the morning air, ready to face another uncertain day. The town looked bright from afar, shops opening, people greeting each other, but for Maria, each door she knocked on meant another test of hope. She asked politely at a laundry shop, then at a cafe, then at a small grocery store. Each time she smiled, stood tall, and explained she could clean, wash, or help with children. But the answers were mostly the same. Sorry, no work now. Still, she didn't give up. When she walked back through the narrow streets, the smell of fresh bread made her stomach tighten, but she forced herself to focus. She stopped at a small park bench, where Liam helped Sophie finish the last piece of bread from the night before. "Don't worry, Mama," Liam said with a brave grin. "We'll find something tomorrow." Maria smiled at him with pride and sadness mixed together. How could a child be so strong when life had given him so little? She placed her hand on his head and said softly, "You make me so proud, Liam." Days turned into weeks. The air grew colder and the nights became harder to bear. Sometimes the kind baker left a small bag of leftovers near the back door for her to find. Sometimes neighbors gave her old clothes or a blanket without asking questions. Those small acts of kindness became her strength. But there were also days when no one helped. On those nights, Maria would hum lullabies, her stomach empty, while pretending she wasn't hungry. Sophie would fall asleep easily, but Liam often stayed awake, watching his mother in the dim light. "Mama," he whispered one night, "why don't people help us? We didn't do anything wrong." Maria's eyes filled with tears. She brushed his hair gently. "Sometimes people forget how hard life can be," she said softly. "But we must never forget to be kind, even when others aren't." One cold morning, Maria woke up to find frost on the ground inside their shelter. Sophie's small hands were cold as ice. Maria quickly wrapped both children in the blanket, blowing warm air onto their fingers. She knew they couldn't stay here much longer. The roof leaked more each time it rained, and the nights were freezing. That day, she decided to visit the church that Martin had mentioned before. It was her last hope. She walked in with her children, her head bowed, her heart heavy. The priest, a kind old man named Father Thomas, welcomed her with gentle eyes. He listened quietly as Maria told her story, how she had lost her husband, how her family turned her away, how she was doing her best to protect her children. Father Thomas placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You are a strong woman, Maria," he said softly. "Faith lives in your heart even when you feel lost. There is a shelter nearby. It's not much, but it's warm and safe." Maria thanked him with tears in her eyes. For the first time in weeks, she felt seen, understood. He gave her directions to a small community house on the edge of town. It wasn't fancy, but it was a place where mothers and children could rest for a few days. That evening, Maria and her children reached the shelter. The walls were plain but clean, and there was a warm meal waiting, soup and bread. The children ate quickly, smiling for the first time in days. Maria closed her eyes for a moment and whispered a prayer of thanks. But as she sat there, she couldn't stop thinking about what would happen next. The shelter could only allow families to stay for a short time. After that, they had to move on. It gave her comfort for the moment, but not for the future. She needed work, something permanent, something to give her children a real life again. For the next few days, she worked hard helping at the shelter, cleaning dishes, washing clothes, helping other mothers care for their children. Her kindness didn't go unnoticed. The woman who managed the shelter, Mrs. Green, liked her spirit. "You're a good soul, Maria," she said one afternoon. "The world needs more people like you." Maria smiled shyly. "I just do what I can." But her time there ended sooner than she hoped. The shelter was full and new families kept arriving. Mrs. Green apologized, explaining that they had to make space for others. She gave Maria some food, a small blanket, and whispered, "There's an old cottage by the river, empty for years. It's not much, but maybe you could stay there for a while. It's safer than the streets." Maria thanked her deeply, tears in her eyes once again. She took her children and began walking toward the river. The road was long and quiet, the sky turning a soft gray. Liam carried the small bag of food while Sophie sang softly, skipping over fallen leaves. Maria watched them and felt a spark of hope. Small, but alive. As they reached the river, the sound of flowing water filled the air. The cottage stood hidden among tall trees, its roof covered in moss, the windows dusty but unbroken. Maria pushed the door gently. It opened with a creak. Inside it smelled of wood and rain, but it was dry and calm. "This will be our home," Maria said softly. Sophie clapped her hands with joy, and Liam nodded with a smile. They swept the floor, cleaned the corners, and arranged their few belongings. That night, as they lay under the old blanket, Maria whispered stories about stars and angels. Sophie fell asleep holding her mother's hand, and Liam whispered, "I think Papa would like this place." Maria smiled in the dark. "I think so too." Days passed peacefully, though food was still hard to find. Maria often went into town, offering to wash clothes or clean yards for coins. Some people accepted, others turned away. She didn't mind anymore. Even one kind smile was enough to keep her going. But one evening, when she returned to the cottage after a long day, she found something strange. The small pile of firewood near the door had doubled. Someone had left more wood, neatly stacked, and a loaf of bread wrapped in cloth. She looked around but saw no one. The trees swayed gently in the wind, silent witnesses to a quiet act of kindness. Maria stood there holding the bread, unsure whether to feel afraid or grateful. Then she smiled. "Maybe an angel passed by," she whispered to her children as they ate dinner that night. Liam's eyes shone. "Maybe Papa sent him," he said. Maria nodded. Maybe he did. From that day, every few nights they found small gifts, fruit, a blanket, sometimes even milk. Maria never saw who left them. She only knew that somewhere out there someone cared. Someone was watching quietly, helping them survive. The world around her still had shadows, but little by little the light began to return. Maria didn't know it yet, but this silent helper would soon become a part of their story, a stranger whose kindness would change their lives forever. As the moon rose above the river, Maria sat by the window of the small cottage. Her children were asleep beside the fire. She looked out at the silver light dancing on the water and whispered softly, "Thank you, whoever you are." For the first time in months, her heart felt lighter. She still didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but tonight she believed that maybe, just maybe, life was not done being kind, and somewhere in the quiet woods, a man watched from a distance, a soft smile on his face. He had been leaving the gifts, unseen and silent, drawn by something he couldn't explain. Soon their paths would cross and both their stories would begin to change. Morning came softly over the quiet river. A thin layer of mist covered the trees and the sunlight touched the cottage roof like a promise of hope. Inside, Maria woke to the smell of bread, the one left the night before. Her children were still sleeping, their faces calm and innocent. For a moment, she just sat there watching them. Her heart was tired, but her soul was beginning to believe again. She had no idea who was leaving the food and wood for them, but each time she found something new by the door, it felt like a gentle reminder that they were not forgotten. She taught her children to say thank you each time, even though no one was there to hear. "Gratitude keeps the heart warm," she would tell them with a smile. One afternoon, Maria went into town to look for work. The walk was long, but she didn't mind the distance. The rhythm of her steps helped her think. She asked around at small shops, offering to clean, sweep, or wash clothes. Some people smiled kindly. Some looked away. When the sun began to lower, she started her walk home, carrying only a few coins and a piece of fruit that a kind shopkeeper had given her. As she reached the path near the river, she noticed someone standing by the edge of the trees, a man, tall and quiet, dressed in simple clothes. He seemed to be stacking wood near the cottage. Her first instinct was to stop, but when he turned and saw her, his face was calm and his eyes were kind. "I'm sorry," he said quickly, stepping back a little. "I didn't mean to frighten you." Maria looked at him carefully. His hair was streaked with gray and his eyes carried a sadness she couldn't quite name. "Were you the one leaving these things?" she asked softly. He smiled a little, his eyes lowering. "Yes," he admitted. "I pass by here often. When I saw the lights at night, I realized someone was staying here. I thought, maybe I could help." Maria didn't know what to say. For weeks she had wondered who their mysterious helper was. Now standing before her, he seemed gentle and sincere, not someone to fear. "You've been kind to us," she said quietly. "You don't even know us," the man nodded. "My name is Samuel Hart. Most people just call me Mr. Hart. I live a little way down the road near the hills." He smiled faintly. "And I don't need to know someone to lend a hand." Maria smiled back for the first time in days. "I'm Maria. These are my children, Liam and Sophie." From that moment, a quiet friendship began. Mr. Hart didn't talk much, but his kindness spoke louder than words. Every few days he came by the cottage with something helpful. A bag of rice, fresh milk, sometimes even candles or soap. Maria always tried to refuse, saying she didn't want to take too much, but he would shake his head gently and say, "It's no trouble. I have more than I need." In return, Maria began helping him with small tasks. She cleaned his garden, cooked meals when he was working outside, and even mended his torn shirts. He tried to pay her, but she always smiled and said, "Friends don't need to count favors." Mr. Hart's small home was warm and simple, filled with books, old photos, and the scent of wood and tea. He rarely spoke about himself, but little by little Maria noticed things. A photograph of a woman and a child on his mantel, a small locket he sometimes carried in his hand when he thought no one was watching. There was sorrow in his eyes, quiet but deep, like a wound time had not yet healed. One evening, as the children played near the river, Maria and Mr. Hart sat outside watching the sunset. The sky was painted with pink and gold, and the soft sound of the water filled the silence between them. "You've helped us so much," Maria said softly. "I don't know how to thank you." Mr. Hart looked down at his hands. "You already have," he replied gently. "You've brought laughter back to this place. I'd forgotten what it sounded like." Maria tilted her head slightly. "You live alone?" He nodded slowly. "Yes, my wife and daughter." His voice trailed off, the rest unspoken. Maria didn't press him. She simply sat quietly beside him, letting the silence comfort him instead of words. She understood grief, the kind that sits quietly in the heart, showing itself only through small sighs and long pauses. From that day, something subtle began to change. The children grew attached to Mr. Hart. Liam helped him carry wood, and Sophie loved to listen to his stories about the forest, stories about kind foxes, talking trees, and rivers that sang in the night. He told them with such warmth that they forgot their worries and laughed freely again. Maria often watched them from the doorway, her heart swelling with gratitude. She hadn't seen her children laugh like that since Daniel's passing. Mr. Hart's presence had brought light into their small world. Soft, steady light that didn't burn, only warmed. One rainy afternoon, when thunder rolled softly across the hills, Mr. Hart came to check on them. "You'll need more wood for the night," he said, bringing a bundle inside. Maria smiled. "You always think ahead." "We would have managed." He shook his head with a smile. "It's easier to face storms when you're not alone." As the rain poured outside, Maria made tea and they all sat by the fire. Sophie leaned against her mother, and Liam listened to one of Mr. Hart's gentle stories. For a while, the world outside disappeared. No hunger, no fear, only warmth and laughter. Later, after the children had fallen asleep, Maria thanked him again. "You've given us more than food or shelter," she said softly. "You gave us peace." Mr. Hart looked into the fire, his eyes thoughtful. "Peace," he said slowly, "is something we give each other. You've given it to me too." Maria blinked, surprised. "Me?" he nodded. "Before I met you and the children, my days were quiet but empty. I thought I had nothing left to give or receive. But seeing you fight for your children, seeing their smiles return, it reminded me that there's still goodness in the world." Maria felt her throat tighten. "You're a good man, Mr. Hart." He smiled faintly. "Just a man who forgot how to live until you reminded him." The days turned into a gentle rhythm. Maria found small jobs nearby, washing clothes, helping at the church, collecting berries to sell at the market. Mr. Hart often walked her halfway to town, carrying her basket without being asked. The people in town began to notice them, the kind man with the widow and her children, and whispered kindly among themselves. Some even offered work after seeing their quiet determination. At night, when the stars filled the sky, Maria sometimes sat by the river and thought about Daniel. She still missed him deeply, but her grief had softened into memory instead of pain. "You sent him to us, didn't you?" she would whisper to the sky, thinking of Mr. Hart. "You knew we needed someone like him." And in another small house not far away, Mr. Hart sat by his fire, holding the photograph of his wife and daughter. "I think you'd like her," he whispered softly. "She has your kindness. And those children, they remind me of her smile." Though neither spoke of it aloud, a bond had begun to grow, one made not of romance, but of shared healing. Their hearts had been broken by loss, yet together, they had found something gentle and real. The comfort of company, the beauty of kindness, and the light of new beginnings. The forest around them, once quiet and lonely, now echoed with laughter, stories, and the sound of hope returning. And while neither of them could see the full path ahead, both Maria and Mr. Hart knew one thing for sure. They were no longer walking it alone. Days turned into weeks, and the quiet friendship between Maria and Mr. Hart grew stronger with every sunrise. What had started as an act of kindness slowly became a bond filled with comfort and care. The cottage by the river no longer felt lonely. It was alive with laughter, the smell of food, and the warmth of company. Maria often found herself humming while she cleaned or cooked. Sophie liked to sing along, and Liam helped her fetch water from the well nearby. Mr. Hart visited almost every day, bringing small things they might need, salt, oil, or sometimes just his company. One evening, Maria noticed that Mr. Hart looked more tired than usual. He was sitting by the fence, staring at the sunset with faraway eyes. His hands rested on his knees and his face carried a sadness she couldn't ignore. She stepped outside, brushing her apron with her hands, and walked toward him. "You look deep in thought," she said softly. He smiled faintly. "Old memories," he replied. "They come and go like the wind." Maria sat beside him. "Memories can be painful," she said quietly. "But they can also remind us that we once loved deeply." He looked at her then, his eyes filled with quiet sorrow. "You're right," he said. "I've been holding mine too tightly, afraid to let them fade." For a moment they both sat in silence, watching the river glow golden under the setting sun. Then Mr. Hart spoke again, his voice low and gentle. "I never told you much about myself," he began. "I suppose it's time." Maria turned toward him, listening carefully. "Years ago," he said, "I had a family. My wife's name was Claire, and we had a little girl named Lily. She was only 6 when—" He paused, his breath catching for a moment. "They were on their way to see me at work when their carriage overturned on the road. I wasn't there. I came too late. From that day on, I couldn't bear to stay in the town. I moved out here near the river, away from everyone. I thought if I stayed alone, I wouldn't hurt anymore." His eyes glistened in the light of dusk. "But the truth is, silence doesn't heal. It only hides the pain." Maria felt tears fill her own eyes. She reached out and placed a gentle hand on his. "I understand," she said softly. "I lost my husband not long ago. The world felt empty after that. Every sound reminded me of him. I tried to forget, but forgetting only made the ache deeper." Mr. Hart nodded. "Yes," he said, "it's the same kind of emptiness. But when I saw you and your children that day, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. The need to care again. You reminded me that life still has purpose even after loss." Maria smiled through her tears. "And you reminded me that kindness still exists." The air between them was quiet but full of understanding, full of peace. From that evening, something gentle changed in both their hearts. The pain that had once been heavy began to lighten, not because it disappeared, but because it was finally shared. Over the next few weeks, Maria and the children began visiting Mr. Hart more often. They helped him clean his small house, plant flowers in the garden, and cook meals. The once empty home started to look brighter. Sophie loved to water the flowers, and Liam followed Mr. Hart everywhere, eager to learn how to fix things. One morning, while fixing a broken chair together, Liam asked, "Mr. Hart, did you ever have a little boy like me?" Mr. Hart smiled softly. "No, but I had a little girl with hair like your sister's. She loved to sing and draw stars on every piece of paper she found." Liam nodded thoughtfully. "Then maybe Sophie and I can be like your children now." Mr. Hart's eyes grew warm, and for a moment he couldn't speak. He simply nodded and patted Liam's shoulder. "I'd like that very much," he said quietly. That night Maria saw a difference in Mr. Hart's smile. It wasn't the polite smile he used to wear. It was lighter, freer, touched with real joy. And she realized something. Healing doesn't come all at once. It comes in moments like this, small, kind, and honest. As spring came, the garden bloomed with color. Flowers of white and pink surrounded the cottage, and butterflies danced in the air. The children played outside, their laughter echoing through the trees. Maria watched them while hanging laundry, her heart full. For the first time in a long while, life felt peaceful. But one afternoon, Maria noticed that Mr. Hart didn't come by. The next day, he didn't appear again. She began to worry. On the third morning, she decided to visit his house. She walked through the trees carrying a small basket of soup and bread. When she reached his home, she found him sitting by the fireplace, looking pale and tired. "Mr. Hart," she said, stepping closer. "Are you all right?" He smiled weakly. "Just a little fever," he said softly. "It will pass." Maria frowned gently. "You shouldn't stay alone when you're sick. Come to the cottage. The children will be happy to see you, and I can take care of you until you feel better." He tried to protest, but she insisted. "You've helped us more than you know. Now it's our turn." And so for the next few days, Mr. Hart stayed at the cottage. Maria made warm soup. Sophie brought him flowers, and Liam read him stories. The small home felt even more alive with everyone together. Mr. Hart began to recover quickly, and his face regained its color. One evening, as he sat by the fire with the children asleep beside him, Mr. Hart looked at Maria and said softly, "I never thought I'd have a family again, but somehow you and your children gave me one." Maria's eyes shimmered in the golden light. "Family isn't only by blood," she said gently. "It's about the people who care when they don't have to." He smiled, his eyes warm and filled with peace. "Then I am lucky indeed." From then on, they became inseparable. Every day had its rhythm. Mornings filled with laughter, afternoons spent in the garden, evenings by the fire. The sadness that had once clouded their hearts began to fade like a mist lifting after rain. Maria often found herself thinking about Daniel, not with pain, but with gratitude. She believed he would be happy to know that she and the children were safe, loved, and smiling again. She often looked at the sky and whispered, "Thank you for sending us to him." Mr. Hart, too, began to find joy in simple things again. He repaired the cottage roof, built a small swing for the children, and even began to paint again, something he hadn't done since losing his family. His favorite subjects were the river, the garden, and the children playing under the trees. One afternoon, he handed Maria a small canvas. It showed the cottage, sunlight spilling across the flowers, and 3 figures, a woman and 2 children, standing by the door. "It's our home," he said softly, "the one you brought back to life." Maria held the painting close, her eyes full of emotion. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It's peace," he said gently, "and peace looks like you and your children." From that day forward, the pain that once ruled their hearts turned into something else. A quiet strength, a shared understanding of how love, even when lost, could be reborn in new forms. They didn't need to speak of the past anymore. It was part of them, but it no longer controlled them. Together they had found something worth more than anything they had lost. A new beginning, filled with care, warmth, and trust. The river outside the cottage flowed gently, carrying the reflection of the evening sun. The air smelled of spring flowers and fresh earth. Inside, the fire glowed softly, and laughter filled the air once more. The world had taken much from them, but it had also given something precious back. A second chance to love, to heal, and to belong. And as Maria looked around the small cottage, her children asleep, Mr. Hart reading quietly by the fire, she realized that hope, once lost, can return in the gentlest of ways, through the kindness of a heart once broken but never truly gone. The first light of morning touched the trees by the river, turning the water into a ribbon of gold. Birds began to sing softly, as if greeting the new day with joy. Inside the little cottage, the air smelled of fresh bread and wildflowers. Maria stood by the window, watching the sun rise over the hills. Her children were still sleeping, and Mr. Hart sat by the table, sketching quietly in his small notebook. Life had changed in a way Maria never imagined. The fear that once filled her days was gone. The sadness that once weighed on her heart had turned into calm. Every morning brought something to be thankful for: laughter, warmth, food, and the feeling of safety. Liam had grown stronger and more confident. He helped Mr. Hart with small repairs, learning how to fix chairs, make shelves, and chop wood. Sophie had found her own little joys. She loved picking flowers from the garden and bringing them to decorate the kitchen table. The cottage that once looked lonely now felt alive, a place filled with care and laughter. Maria had found steady work at the town's bakery. The kind owner, Mrs. Hill, admired her hard work and gentle heart. "You bring good spirit with you, Maria," she often said. "People can taste kindness in bread, you know." Each morning Maria left early, walking through the soft mist while her children stayed with Mr. Hart. He watched over them like a guardian, helping them study, telling them stories, and teaching them small lessons about life. When Maria returned in the evening, the children ran to greet her, their faces bright and happy. The days passed peacefully, filled with simple joys, shared meals, songs by the fire, and quiet moments when the wind carried the scent of the garden through the open windows. Sometimes Maria would sit outside at night, watching the stars. Mr. Hart would join her, and they would talk softly about the past, the present, and everything in between. "I used to think my life ended the day Daniel left me," Maria said one night, her eyes on the sky. "But I was wrong. It was only a pause. I just needed time and kindness to begin again." Mr. Hart smiled gently. "I thought the same after losing Claire and Lily. I stopped living, thinking it was the only way to keep them close. But life has a strange way of healing us when we least expect it." Maria nodded. "Sometimes healing comes in the form of people we never knew we needed." Their eyes met for a brief moment, full of quiet understanding. There was no need for grand words. Their hearts already spoke the language of gratitude and care. As the months passed, the seasons changed again. The trees around the river turned green and full, and the garden bloomed beautifully. The townspeople began to know them as one family. The kind widow, her 2 children, and the gentle man who had given them a new start. People often smiled when they passed, and children waved at Liam and Sophie as they walked through the town. One afternoon, Maria was called to the bakery's back room. Mrs. Hill handed her a small envelope. "This is for you," she said kindly. "You've worked hard, Maria. You've earned not only your pay but my trust. I'd like you to manage the bakery when I travel next month." Maria stood frozen for a moment, unable to speak. "Me?" she asked softly. Mrs. Hill smiled. "Yes, you. You have steady hands and a good heart. That's what keeps a place like this alive." Tears filled Maria's eyes as she nodded. "Thank you, truly." That evening, she returned home with joy in her heart. She told Mr. Hart and the children about the news. Sophie clapped her hands and danced around, and Liam hugged his mother tightly. Mr. Hart's eyes shone with quiet pride. "You see, Maria," he said softly, "life gives back to those who never stop giving." Maria smiled. "It wasn't just me," she said. "You helped us believe again." The next few weeks were filled with excitement. The bakery grew busier, and Maria handled everything with calm and care. Mr. Hart continued to help her at home, fixing small things, tending to the garden, and taking the children fishing by the river. Every evening they gathered at the table, sharing stories of the day. One night after the children had gone to bed, Maria noticed Mr. Hart sitting quietly by the window, looking thoughtful. "You seem lost in your thoughts," she said softly. He looked up and smiled. "Just thinking about how much has changed," he said. "This little cottage, your laughter, the children's joy. It's like the world found its light again." Maria walked closer. "You gave us that light, Mr. Hart." He shook his head gently. "No, Maria, you already had it. I only helped you see it again." Maria looked down for a moment, her heart full. "Then maybe," she said, smiling softly, "we helped each other." He nodded slowly. "Yes, that sounds right." As days turned into months, they became more than friends, and they became a family. Not one born of blood, but of love, trust, and care. The children began calling him Uncle Hart, and his eyes always lit up when they did. The laughter that once filled the house returned, stronger than ever. During the spring fair, Maria and the children set up a small stall selling bread and cakes from the bakery. Mr. Hart helped decorate it with wildflowers, and soon their stall became one of the most loved at the fair. People from nearby towns came to taste Maria's bread and see the cheerful children by her side. As the fair ended and the sun began to set, Mr. Hart stood quietly, watching them with contentment. "They've grown so much," he said softly. Maria looked at the children, smiling. "They have. And so have we." He turned to her, his eyes warm. "Do you ever think about the day we met?" Maria laughed softly. "I do. I still remember the first time I saw you stacking wood near our door. I was so scared then, scared of the world, of tomorrow, of everything. But that day changed our lives." Mr. Hart smiled. "It changed mine too." The gentle wind carried their words toward the river, where the golden light danced on the water. The world around them was quiet, peaceful, and full of meaning. That night, as they walked home, Sophie ran ahead, holding her mother's hand. "Mama," she said excitedly, "Mr. Hart said he will teach me to draw stars tomorrow." Maria laughed softly. "That sounds lovely." Liam walked beside them, carrying a basket of leftover bread. "Mr. Hart says stars never go away," he said proudly. "Even when we can't see them, they're still shining." Maria smiled at his words. "He's right," she said. "Sometimes hope is like that, hidden, but always there." When they reached the cottage, the children went to bed quickly, tired from the day's joy. Maria stepped outside for a moment, standing under the night sky. The moon was bright and the stars scattered like tiny sparks of hope. Mr. Hart joined her quietly, handing her a cup of warm tea. "It's a clear night," he said softly. "Yes," Maria replied, looking up. "It feels like the sky is smiling," he nodded. "Maybe it is. Maybe it's happy to see hearts that once were broken now full again." They stood in silence for a while, letting the gentle night wrap around them. Then Maria spoke again, her voice calm and full of warmth. "You know, I used to think kindness was something rare. But now I think it's like these stars and everywhere if only we look. Mr. Hart smiled. You've always seen light even in the darkest times. That's why your children shine so brightly. Maria looked at him with gratitude. And you, she said softly, are the reason we found our way back to it. He looked out at the river, his eyes peaceful. Then my journey wasn't in vain, he said quietly. I thought I had lost everything, but now I see. Sometimes losing leads us to what we truly need. Maria nodded, her eyes glistening. Yes. Life took much from us, but it gave something greater in return. A new family, a new reason to smile. The fire inside the cottage flickered softly, and the sound of the river filled the night. The world around them was calm, as if it too had found peace in their story. As dawn slowly approached, Maria whispered to the morning air, "We're home now." And she was right. They were home, not because of the walls around them, but because of the love, kindness, and hope they shared within them. The cottage by the river stood quietly, surrounded by flowers and laughter. And though life would always bring its share of seasons, joy and sorrow, sun and rain, the bond they had built would remain steady, like the river that never stopped flowing. For Maria, Liam, Sophie, and Mr. Hart, the world had become gentle again, a world where broken hearts could mend, where strangers could become family, and where even the smallest act of kindness could change a life forever. And under the soft light of morning, a new story began, one written not in pain, but in love, peace, and hope that would never fade.